Division 2. And before we get started, I will read our required script. As chair of Division 2 of the House Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This public meeting will be pertaining to Department of Education, and it may follow with some votes on issues that we still have to address. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice for this meeting complies with House Rules and RSA 91A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should email lba_fiscal@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. LBA staff are on the meeting assisting us. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Representative Lynn, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Turcott.
Representative Turcott is on the third floor of the State House in the Daniel Webster Conference Room by himself.
Thank you. Representative Porter.
I'm here in my home in Hillsborough. I'm alone in the room, but my husband is in the house.
All right. Representative Ellison, are you replacing Representative Heath? Is that the idea?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm home here alone in Concord.
Thank you. Representative Petrie.
Representative Petrie is here in Farmington. Just got the dog today.
Thank you. I'm Representative Lynn. I am actually here in not so sunny Orlando, Florida, and I'm alone in the room at the moment. Representative Murray.
Oh, good morning. Kate Murray is here in Newcastle. Did you call me? I missed part of my name.
Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I did.
I was just jumping in. Kate Murray is at home in Newcastle. The dog and the husband are in the basement.
Thank you. And Representative Umberger.
Yes, I'm Representative Umberger, and I'm in my home in Kearsarge, New Hampshire, and my husband is in the house.
All right, thank you.
Okay, before we get started with with DOE, it was announced this morning the legislative briefing will be held on April 6th. There's no time at this point. Also, I believe that the presentations for the budget are going to be held on the 29th, and the Finance Committee voting will be on the 31st. I think that's the schedule. And as soon as I know something final, then I will be sure to let everyone know, because those are obviously extremely important dates. So that's what I know at this point.
What was
So
the second one?
I believe
Active
it,
legislative briefing before the vote. What was that one?
the 31st.
What was on the one before that?
Oh, the 29th.
And that was,
That's when Division 2 will present its information to the full Finance Committee, each one of the divisions. Okay, so I think that's the plan. And we'll, as we get further on in the week, I obviously will have better details for everybody on that. Also, tomorrow, we will be talking about the merger of UNH and CCSNH. And Representative Turcott, etc., has an amendment, and hopefully that will get out to the entire committee sometime today, so that we can have an opportunity to review it and be prepared for whatever conversation takes place tomorrow. So that's what I know right now. And Wednesday, I will say that we will have a lot of votes to accomplish, and Thursday, the same thing. And hopefully we can wrap up relatively easily on Friday morning, so that Mickey has an opportunity to do his things, so that we are all prepared for the division presentation to the full committee. So, okay. I see that some of our education folks are here. So, Caitlin, if you would like to begin, I'd appreciate it.
Good morning.
Morning.
So we don't have a formal presentation prepared. I don't know how do you want us, what would you like us to do today, I guess? What works best for the committee?
Well, what I'd like you to do is basically tell us where we are and what things are we needing to come to grips with in order to finalize DOE's budget. And
Sure,
then,
absolutely.
Then
Yeah, so
I have a couple of questions that I need to ask. So.
okay, do you want to start off by asking the questions and then we can talk?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, all right, so today we're here to specifically talk about the Education Trust Fund. There may be some other areas of the budget need to be discussed, but we're not.
Excuse me just a second. Representative Ellison, would you put yourself on mute, please?
Yes, it is.
And Representative Porter. And if you have a question at any time, just raise your hand and I will call on you in order. So I'm sorry, Caitlin, excuse me.
That's okay. I needed to put my headphones in anyways. Forgot about that. Okay, so today I believe we need to make a couple decisions about the Education Trust Fund. and then a couple other Department of Education expenditures, potentially around student information systems. I think the first couple of things, the first thing that we actually wanted to talk about, just for the sake of timing, is we wanted to talk about career and tech education. So Eric Falworth is able to be on the phone with us, but not for the entire morning. So I wanted to make sure that if the committee has any specific special education question, or sorry, special education, career and tech education questions, that we address them with Eric. So where we left things off 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when the department had done the original presentation, is we discussed the continuing appropriations of career and tech education, tuition and transportation that's in the Education Trust Fund. So that is currently in the Education Trust Fund, budgeted at an amount of, sorry, I just don't have it. Of $9 million per year. So that $9 million per year is consistent what was budgeted in fiscal year 20 and 21. We believe that provides a prorated amount of career and tech education across the state of New Hampshire. To not prorate it, we would need about 12 million, Eric, or you can jump in with the number. And so did the committee have any specific questions about career and tech education?
Yes, I wanted to get a firm number if what we would project to fully fund the tuition and transportation costs.
Eric, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, I can pull that up. I believe it was close to 15, but 1 second and I can pull the two numbers. So it would be, and this was based on last year's transportation, because this year's transportation is very altered because of COVID and not moving students around as much. So we'd be basing it on the 1920 busing. So an additional $5.1 million above the 9. So 14 million would cover, estimated cover, fully fund tuition and transportation.
Is the major shortfall in tuition or in transportation?
So tuition is 3 million short and transportation is 2 million short.
Can I ask a quick question, Representative? Just a clarification I think that might be needed here.
Yes, please go ahead.
Eric, we've heard in the past that if the tuition and transportation level were to be increased, that would essentially set a new maintenance of effort level moving forward for the Perkins grants. Can you speak a little bit to that, just so the committee understands?
Sure, that absolutely will. The MOE is based on any monies the state spends on CTE. And so if this was increased for an additional 5 million or whatever it would be increased, that will increase the annual MOE, which would mean reducing it in the future would be next to impossible. Because anytime, if we don't meet MOE, then however much we miss it, that amount is reduced by our Perkins for the following year. And we would need to reimburse the federal government for the missed for the current year. So it's sort of a double hit. So yes, an increase kept in mind that that becomes in perpetuity.
Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand that. So if there's an increase, that's not necessarily a good thing, because if there's a decrease in tuition or enrollment later on, we're stuck with paying that difference. Is that right? So there's a downside to it being increased. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well,
And what's the, I'm sorry.
sure. Yes, I mean, ultimately, I would imagine, yes, the downside would be if in the future, for whatever reason, there was lower enrollment and the full 3 million extra in tuition was not paid, there could be the possibility of a gap problem. Yes.
And state has to fill in the gap.
Yes. I can tell you, honestly, we are, even over the past several years, as high school enrollment numbers have declined, CTE enrollment numbers have increased, and we are continually looking to increase our CTE numbers. So I can't envision a drastic decrease in enrollment that would impact this, but you are correct.
Thank you.
Representative Ellison, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is related to the maintenance of effort. And it's the $600,000 that's been in there every budget for the school dropout account. I know it gets administered by Career Tech. I'm not quite sure where it shows up in the budget. I should know this, I don't. So I guess my question to Eric or Caitlin is the $600,000 or some figure still in there for the school dropout account?
No, it is not.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That was removed this past year.
Okay.
If I may, Representative, just to clarify, Eric, just so I think everyone understands, let's say the budget for tuition and transportation was increased to $11 million this year. Essentially, future budgets would also have to have it at $11 million a year to avoid any sort of MOE non-compliance.
Correct, yes. And honestly, I will clarify that point. The amount of money the state spends on CTE would need to be the same amount. It wouldn't necessarily have to be within the T&T budget. If it was allocated under another budget line somewhere, as long as all of our state spending on T&T kept that level.
Representative Lynn, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I actually have two questions. I want to make sure that I'm understanding. So if I'm understanding correctly, right now, the governor's proposed budget funds the CTE at $9 million for each year. And you were saying that in order to, as you described it, fully fund it, we would have to increase that to 14 million. And is that for each year?
Yes, that is for each year. And I also want to clarify the fully funding.
Okay.
Still talking about only covering the costs of students from sending schools. So it actually is not fully funding CTE. It is fully funding CTE from sending schools. So just so we're okay with that conversation, but I want to clarify that fully funding CTE would be $35 million. And that's a completely different conversation that we're having today.
Right. Okay. All right. And then the second question, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. So if let's just theoretically say we said, okay, we agree, we want to fully fund it at 14 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And are you saying that that our maintenance of effort would be considered to be out of compliance, even if like our suppose that there was a dramatic drop in student population next year, or not in the next biennium, would we still have, we'd still have to fund it at 14 million or risk losing federal funds?
Yes. And there was
I love the federal government.
if there's a drastic change in a state situation, we can request a recalculation of the MOE, but it is intended as, if the federal government is going to continue to give us $6 million in Perkins money based on our student population, and we've committed to providing X amount of dollars, say it's 14 million in state money, we can't drop our 14 million because they're still giving us the 6. So.
Okay, all right. I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
I think,
Yes.
I mean, I think maintenance of efforts are extremely frustrating in
Yes.
that way, because it forces people to keep sometimes expenditures low and it doesn't allow the flexibility. But I guess that is also the point, is that so that there will not be, kind of ebbs and flows as far as funding different programs. But there have certainly been times that you all have, thought about spending more money on a certain program, but then because if you added the money that you had, say, one-time money to add, that could cause future declines or elimination of the federal program at the state level that you haven't funded it. And it's frustrating. I've had that conversation with federal partners in the past, and they don't seem to, really get it. Yeah. So it's an unfortunate side effect of maintenance of effort requirements.
If we did this, do we know what the additional maintenance of effort money would be?
Our maintenance of effort would increase by whatever the TNT amount was increased by.
So you're saying our level of effort money would go up from whatever it is today, it would go up another $10 million? Is that what I heard you say?
No, well, the increase, so if you increased TNT by $3 million, then our maintenance of effort would increase by that same $3 million.
Okay, so it's kind of a double whammy, is what you're saying.
For example, the maintenance of effort for our projected maintenance of effort for FY 22 right now is $9,522,000 is what our projected maintenance of effort would be for FY 22. Based on the 9 million for tuition and transportation, and then all of the other state expenses towards CTE. If we increase TNT by $3 million, then our MOE would become the 12,522,000. And then the following year, it would continue to, and they always move up every year because as salaries and benefits for all the state employees, it will keep inching up. And so we would need to continue to meet that match. Yes.
Okay, Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, I guess, interject. So given demographic projections, even though you have a really strong and robust program, there being fewer people around to attend the programs, it's a pretty good bet that enrollment at some point is going to drop.
We're actually hoping not. I can certainly understand an argument on both sides of this. Our goal is to expand CTE to more students, and that especially as the state continues to push towards the 65 by 25, enrolling more and more students into CTE, whether they are physically at the CTE, the regional CTE centers, or we begin offering CTE programming at local high schools. We are talking to VLACs about offering CTE programs through VLACs. So we are absolutely hoping to expand CTE, but I understand your concern.
Eric, for this CTE for yours, does it have a student way of looking at it, or it's just dollar for dollar? Because I know some of our maintenance of efforts look at the number of students, and some of there's just dollar.
We are strictly dollar.
So for example, just for the committee's knowledge, so we have maintenance of effort for like our title programs for Every Student Succeeds Act. And our maintenance of effort for that, look, you can do it 2 different ways. You can look at total spending, or you can look at student by student spend, or student spending by student. There we go.
Well, thank you, Eric. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Lynn, you had another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to, so you know what, can I just ask one other thing to make sure that I'm fully understanding this? Does the federal amount, does the amount that the federal government gives us related to this, does that change based upon students? In other words, if we say in a future biennium, well, we have less students, are they going to give us less federal money?
So the Perkins allocation cannot be lower than the previous years, but it will increase. It increases if the federal government increases the budget for it, or if our student population, and part of it is our student population under the poverty line increases. But under the Perkins regulation, if we receive $6.1 million this year, our allocation next year cannot be less than $6.1 million. But hopefully it will continue to go up as the federal government each year has increased the funding by about 5%. So yeah, so it will not go down.
All right, thank you.
Yes, that was a great question.
I think I'm learning more about the Perkins grant than I ever wanted to know, but I'm sorry. I did not realize that the Perkins grant was a dollar for dollar match.
Oh, for the MOE, yes.
Yeah, for the MOE. I did not, if I knew that, I didn't remember it. So, okay. Are there any other questions for Eric? By the way, he's doing a great job in the CTE arena. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. And we are happy to have you on our advisory committee now as well, Representative.
Yeah, okay. That'll be fun. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Caitlin, can you bring up something that's easier, please?
I can try. Let's see. We could try with special education aid.
Well, there's a good one.
Yeah, it might be easier. I'm not 100% sure. So for special education aid, the amount of money that we have did fully fund the appropriation in fiscal year 21, did fully fund the liability. So we were appropriated 30 point, sorry, just trying to read this. Special education aid. So we were appropriated $30.8 million in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. And in fiscal year 21, we fully expended that obligation, meaning we gave all of the money to the schools and were able to pay them at 100%. In fiscal year 2020, we were slightly short. We prorated schools at 94%, meaning that we think that fully funding catastrophic aid / state special education aid at around $30 million will likely fully fund on a normal year. To fully fund it, it would have needed to been around $33 to $34 million for 21, or sorry, for 20. Now, when I'm talking about 20 though, remember that I'm talking about the kids that were in school in fiscal 19 or 18 and 19. So it was based on 1 year behind. So then when we're talking about fiscal year 21, it was the kids that were in school year 2019, 2020. And because we had less expenditures and less kids, a lot of that had to do with the pandemic beginning in March. And some of those out of district placement kids being sent home. So the costs of those kids were less for fiscal year 21. So that's why we suggest for a normal year, we think that a $33 to $34 million appropriation would make the most sense. Now, there is less legislation right now that's proposed to change 3.5 times to 2.5 times. So those of you that remember our presentation from a couple of weeks ago, so right now we pay for costs for kids that exceed 3.5 times the average cost for pupil to educate. So right now that's about $60 million per kid that was then eligible for reimbursement. There's legislation pending to change that to 2.5 times. And so we estimate that the cost to fund the 2.5 times kids or to change that adjustment would be an additional $10 million for just the kids that we have. Now, the thing that I want to point out is so school districts don't enter information to us or provide us with information and costs associated with kids until they make that 3.5 times. So when we're talking about that $10 million, it's we have the data for those kids that are 3.5 times, so we can figure out how much more we would owe the school districts if at 2.5 times. The data that we don't have at the Department of Education, and is a big wild card in this, is that the 2.5, if the number of kids that kind of right now fall between the 2.5 times and the 3.5 times cost. You know, we don't have any information for them. There may be another 1,000 kids. There could be several thousand kids. We have about 30,000 special education kids in the state right now, of which about 900 of them are eligible for catastrophic state special education aid. And so that number would likely increase, but we don't know what that differential would be.
Could you repeat the number of children at the 3.5%, please?
Sure, so let me pull up the exact number for you. I'll take just a moment.
I have 742. Is that what you have?
Yes, yeah, that's the number, 742. So 742 was the number this year. Mark, could you pull up the number for fiscal year 21 or fiscal year 20 as well, though?
Oh, I don't know if I have that.
It's saying 742 students who are,
3.5 times the average expenditure per pupil. That's what their special education aid is costing. So it's costing about the average expenditure per pupil is around $17,000. So they're costing closer to $60,000 to educate.
Okay, so the 742 children are costing the state $60 million. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I'm going to screen share with you so you can see this. You can see the chart in front of me here.
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So you can see here for fiscal year 21, we had 742 kids. The total expended to those kids right now was $80 million. Then that's what the school districts cost total for those kids. What the state would pay for them is $29 million at 3.5 times. Now, when we went back and did the math and we said, all right, well, when did the kid hit the cutoff of 2.5 times? That would be an additional $10 million on top of this, so about $40 million for this. So this number wouldn't change right here. So the districts are still spending that amount of money per kid, no matter what. It's just how much they are eligible for to submit for reimbursement for the state. Because this 59 million becomes about 40 million.
So this is expense and then reimbursement for the following year. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And I don't have an MOE on this, right?
Well, we do have an MOE on this. It's a little bit more or less complicated, or more complicated depending on what you want to say it. So that maintenance of effort also has several other pots of money in it, including adequacy funding and some 402 funding in other areas. So there is a maintenance of effort. If you did increase it, in theory, it could increase the maintenance of effort. I do believe, though, for special education, they have two different things. So they have a way of looking at it by pupil. So they look at the number of students spending. And it's also a percentage reduction. So if you reduce it by 2%, then they reduce the IDEA grant by 2% rather than a dollar for dollar reduction. And because adequacy is in the maintenance of effort for this one, there's definitely a lot more flexibility because that pot of money is so large.
Okay, are there any other questions that anyone has on special ed? So if I understood correctly, to get it down to the 2.5%, that would require an additional $10 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So I do want to point out that there is the allowability in state law to prorate this amount of payment. So if you were to say 2.5 times the department and add no appropriation, for example, the proration would just go maybe down to 70 or 60 or maybe even 50%, depending how many more kids are added. There's no requirement for you to add more appropriation, but it certainly decreases the amount of money each school district may get if they have a catastrophic need special education student.
I'll be right with you, Representative Porter, but I need a follow-up. The law right now, if I'm not mistaken, says that if there's any money left over in paying the 80% of the 3.5, that it automatically goes to court-ordered placements.
Yes, that's correct.
And how is our funding currently for court-ordered placements?
So for court-ordered placements,
The governor has it at 2 million each fiscal year.
so and 2 million, with the exception of last year, is about correct. So the last 2 years, well, so our spending in fiscal year 2018 was 2.3 million. Our spending in fiscal year 2009, sorry, school year 2018, so fiscal year 2019, was 22.3 million. 18 and 19 was 2.8 million, and 19 and 20 is 3.2 million. So we have quite a bit of spend in that. It's for 100, we had 103 kids in fiscal year 19-20, and then 89 and 88 the prior 2 years.
Okay, I'll come back. I do have another question, but Representative Porter, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize if this was said and I missed it. The number of students this year is significantly lower than 2 years ago. Is that, and we are assuming that that's a function of the COVID? I guess, are we looking at a reduction in this number that's likely to be permanent as enrollment goes down or demographically? Or is this just a fluke this year that it's at 742 when, 2 years ago it was, if I remember the chart correctly, it was in the around 1,000?
So you can see, I shared my chart again. Can you see
Okay,
that?
it was not that much. Okay.
So we have had a tendency to go down each year. We are trending down. But I do think that likely this past year was historically low because of COVID, because a lot of those care facilities that the children are in were either closed or the parents chose to take the children home and whatnot.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Lynn, you had a question?
Yes, am I understanding correctly that I understand that in some other state aid programs, the situation is different, but am I understanding correctly that for this state program, there's no factor that goes into the formula that accounts for lack of a better term, the wealthiness of the town where the child is, where the child who exceeds the limit lives.
Yes, that is accurate. So the way this formula works is it just looks at the total spend for the child. So it looks at the child's IEP and all of the allowable expenses in the IEP. In most cases, for a state special education kid, usually has an out of district placement. And it looks at the total costs that exceed 3.5 times. And those total costs at 3.5 times are eligible to be reimbursed by the state at 80%. And if there's not enough money to pay 80%, that 80% is prorated. But there's not, where the kid lives does not matter at all.
Thank you.
Representative Porter, did you have another question or you just didn't lower your hand?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I just didn't lower my hand.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I know. So this is kind of if we don't have enough money for court-ordered placements in the budget, we just pay it. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
And hopefully there's money available someplace to actually pay the bill.
Yes.
Okay. Are there, oh, Representative Porter, you have another question? You're
Question,
muted.
Madam Chair. Finish your question, please, and I'll ask mine next.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm trying to get my head around this. The other figures that we were talking about, the 3.5 times and those things, if the state reduces its amount of funding there, that directly impacts what the school districts have to pay and therefore what the local property taxpayer has to absorb. Am I understanding that part correct?
So yes, these expenses are completely incurred by the school districts before they're eligible to be submitted to the department. So the school districts have already incurred all of these costs regardless of what the state reimburses. So the state would just use that amount, the school district uses that additional amount from the state as a revenue, but the school district has to incur the cost regardless of what the state pays.
Right. Can I follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
In it historically, because I'm new to this, excuse me, historically, is this very flexible? Has the state been going up and down on what it reimburses? Or has it been pretty steady over the past, say, 5 years,
So
10 years?
you can see that chart again?
Yep.
Okay, so that chart, I'll have to make this a little bit bigger. So you can see here's the appropriation. So the state of New Hampshire kind of historically had increased it up until 2008, 9, 10. And then we had a pretty large dip. You can remember what happened back in 2008, 9, and 10 with state revenues. And then you can see it has been fairly consistent. And then now in the last 2 years, there was an increase again. So you can see also at this exact same time, expenditures declined a little bit, but not substantially. And so you can see that we prorated it at 100%, then down to 90, 85, 77, 69, and kind of around in the 70s for most of the mid 2000s or 2010s or other teens, whatever they are. And then you have the 94% and then the 100%.
Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yeah, two things. I just want to clarify. The bill that's moving the 3.5 to the 2.5, in the end benefits the towns, and the state is going to have to pick up that extra amount. This is a way of reducing the amount to the town, not reducing the amount that the state's going to pay, but reducing the amount that the town's going to pay. I want to clarify that. And the other thing, given we don't know the status of the bill or, where the bill's going to end up, this isn't something I would generally suggest, but perhaps we need to think about, making our decision, but also having the expectation that it may change when it goes to the Senate, when they know better what that bill's going to do, and when they generally have a better sense of revenues than we do. So that's it.
Okay, we'll have that discussion, Representative Murray. There's no question about that. Right now, that bill is retained in our committee, and we'll see what happens with that. Okay, special ed was a little easier. Thank you, Caitlin. So where do we want to go from here? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Porter has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the coffee is finally hitting and I'm waking up a little bit. I know that when COVID hit, there was a general freeze on things. The governor put a freeze on things in the budget. Has all that money that you listed down there, the 30 million or whatever the figure was at the bottom of the chart, has that gone out to school districts yet, or is that still being held?
No, so we pay it on January 1st each year, and there was no instruction to not pay that money. So we
Okay,
paid
good.
it on January 1st.
Okay, thank you very much for that information.
Okay, what do we want to tackle next, Caitlin?
We could try adequacy.
Oh, now there's something that we can all agree on. Thank you.
So for adequacy, I do actually want to point out to the committee rather, that there was an update to our packet that we had handed out from the week before from earlier this month. We just had one correction to a document that we made. But in our document, we highlighted expenditures for both SB 135, which is a bill that has passed the Senate. I believe being taken up shortly by House Education or Finance. I'm not sure if it's going directly to Finance or whatnot. But so House Bill 135, and I'm going to just share my screen again.
The Senate Bill 135.
Sorry, yes, Senate Bill 1, yes. Thank you. Okay, so these are the different proposals right now. So we have the current law. So current law is adequacy funded at no changes to the law, meaning that I just want to remind the committee that some of the school districts have experienced a substantial decline in the number of free and reduced lunch kids. That is because the federal government allowed school districts to waive the authority to collect a free and reduced lunch application and provide a free or reduced lunch meal to every single child that would like one. So the number of kids that are free and reduced lunch, we don't actually think that has declined that much across the state. However, we do believe we do have a substantially lower number of applications that were provided to the Department of Education. So because of COVID-19, we did have enrollment drops across the state. We had an enrollment drop of approximately 4% across the state in a normal year. And most of you all know that we do have a student population that has historically for the last 10 years been trending down, but that downward trend has only been approximately 1% per year. So the 4% is a substantially larger decline than we would have predicted. However, the free and reduced lunch population, you would think maybe would be a similar decline. The free and reduced lunch population across the state has declined by 25%, meaning that likely there's 25% of kids that are still free and reduced lunch in the state of New Hampshire, but did not actually submit an application for this school year. So the current law requires the Department of Education to use the data that is submitted to the department. There's no flexibilities that are allowed. So if a school district has a kid that submits an application, they then provide that information to the Department of Education, and the Department of Education provides an approximately $2,000 more per kid in the adequacy funding formula. So the current law, if we ran it right now with just the number of kids that submitted an application, that's where you're seeing the 922 million, the 922 million. So quite a large drop. The governor's budget proposes that school districts proposes that the Department of Education provide the same proportional amount of free and reduced lunch aid or for the same number of kids as fiscal year 2020, so the previous year. So if a school district was, say, 30% free and reduced lunch based on the number of ADMs, then we would use that same percentage going forward. So that proposal is $940 million approximately. And House Bill 135 says provide essentially use last year's numbers. So it said, if a school district had 20 kids last year, use the 20 kids, except for a school district that did have more kids, because we do have a few school districts that have more kids. So if they had 20 last year and 25 this year, you would use the 25 for all categories of aid, for differentiated aid, for base aid, for English language learner and whatnot. So those are the different proposals that you have in front of you. There are a variety of other proposals that I think are mostly been tabled at this point, but we can discuss them if you need, or we can come up with an entirely new proposal. So.
Okay, so if I understood what you said, the roughly 29 million would be what's required to put the money back to 2020?
Yes, 29 million on top of the governor's proposal to put it, use the 2020 data, yes.
Okay, okay. All right.
And you do actually want to specify that SB 135 just says to use the average daily membership, so the number of kids. In the 2021 formula, which actually uses the 19 and 20 numbers, there was one-time aid, but 135 does not address the one-time aid. It only provides funding for the average daily membership numbers.
So this is basically a 4% increase in student population is what the difference is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Porter, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. But these figures that you have here do include differentiation for English language learners, and how about performance, third grade test performance, and all those are in this figure
Yes.
that you're in?
So, yes.
And you're using averages to get that? So if my school district had 10 kids that were getting extra aid for getting free and reduced lunches, you're just sending 10 more kids worth, or?
Yeah, so there's no actual averages in the calculation for average daily membership, which is kind of funny.
I know.
And it's average daily membership and attendance, and we actually don't take into attendance into play here. So a lot of people think if a kid is sick, which was a large concern this spring, as you could imagine, that kids were staying home because of COVID, that a school district may receive less aid because of a kid calling out sick. That is not. So there's no average, there's no attendance actually. The attendance is referring to where the kid is attending for the purpose of adequacy. But yes, so for 135, we would look at the number of kids that were in a school district's enrollment that were free and reduced lunch, for example. If there were 10 kids, we would pay for 10 kids. If they had a kid that came in January, we would, so say they had, 9 kids for most of the year, and then 1 kid transfers in January, we would actually pay 9.5 kids. So we base it on the actual number of days that a child is enrolled in a school district.
Can I have a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. So I'm trying to make sure my brain is clear here. I know here in Hillsborough Deering, there was a significant figure, the drop in this ADA and the free and reduced lunches. I think the figure that the superintendent had told me was somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 for the upcoming budget that they were figuring that we just passed in March. When would this additional aid, what time frame are we looking for? If this passes, when does this money go toward the next budgets for schools or toward the current budget? I guess I need schooling in that.
Yeah, so we are talking about right now, so adequacy funding. This is the confusing thing about adequacy is it's paid on 1 year behind kids.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, we're in fiscal year 21. We're talking about the school district budget for fiscal year 21, but they're getting paid for the number of kids that were in school in 2019 and 2020. So what we're talking about here is the school district budgets for fiscal year 22, which most passed in the last couple of weeks here. And we're talking about state fiscal year budget 22, but it's going to be based on 2020 and 21 school year kids. So the kids that are in school right now.
Okay, and the money goes, when does the school district get the check from the state?
Yeah, so 4 times a year, they receive their first check on September 1st of every year, their second check on November 1st, and their third check on January 1st, and their last check on April 1st.
Thank you.
And Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the school population goes up or down during each of those check periods, then the aid goes up and down as well?
So it wouldn't affect the check period because by the check period, we're working 1 year behind, so it's completely finalized. But if when we have our calculation that we do on October 1st every year, we base it on the end of the year data, and we take it down into the half day level. So if a kid were in one school district for half a day and then transferred at lunchtime to another school district, the school districts would receive that the proportional aid. It's a very accurate calculation.
So this aid stays the same all year. And
Yes.
and then for 23 school year, 22, 23 school year is when any number of children up or down would take place.
I'm a little confused by your question on that one.
I guess what I'm saying is that any adjustment in number of children that occurred this year would be reflected in what the school district received next year.
Yes, so yes, this year, any kids that are in school right now that are changing will be in 22, and then kids that are going to start this coming fall will be the 23 school year. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so the number that 135 says to true up the budget, or to true up adequacy for 22 and 23 would be an additional 28 million. Is that correct?
Yes. Just scroll to the top here. Yes, 28 million.
All right. Does anyone have any more questions on that? Okay, very good. Can we try the next issue?
So the next issue is building aid. So I actually might put Mickey on the spot a little bit on this one because I know he was doing a lot of homework over the weekend on building aid. But so for building aid, we have the building aid tail that we fund historically that we will likely should probably continue to fund. That building aid tail is it's school bonded projects over 20 years that was funded under the old way of funding building aid. And then we have requests for new projects. So the new projects are projects that school districts have voted on or are going to be voting on next spring and potentially will be going forward to build those schools, assuming that building aid is received. So those schools, we have a prioritized list of schools. The department hasn't published its, the State Board of Education hasn't published its ranked state list yet. But the way that it works is if any new money is appropriated in building aid, that building aid would go to projects on the list that have voted or have passed rather their warrant article to build the building or the renovation or whatnot.
So are there any schools, any building aid that would be applicable to 2022?
Yes. Mickey, do you happen to have that list? Could you share that?
I mean, these are folks that have already passed the bond and are just waiting for the school aid.
So I don't have it handy. I just, so one thing I'm unsure of, Caitlin, is the last list I saw had Winnisquam as number 1, and then Allenstown is number 2, Sunapee is number 3. But I don't know if their prioritized ranking would change at all based on this last town meeting, because I know out of those 3, for instance, only Allenstown's been locally approved. So would that be elevated when we're talking about new projects for the upcoming biennium?
So there's no requirement for the State Board of Education and the State Building Aid Authority to change the ranking based on their approval. And actually in a normal year, they would be publishing the approved list well before the votes. So typically that is published on December 1st of every year. And then the votes obviously happen in March. Because of the pandemic, the Department of Education actually needed to seek a executive order to extend that deadline because we were not able to do a lot of the visits that we needed that were required to approve the projects. So the State Board of Education should be putting out their list, and I don't know if they will or will not change the order, but there's no requirement for them to change the order.
I can share this if you want, just to, so everyone can see the list we are talking about. Bear with me. Can you see the Excel, hopefully?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So these are the 3 projects we were just discussing here. I could probably zoom in to make this a little bit. But this is the information that we have that Amy provided us. I think even in one of the older documents from a couple weeks ago, this information is in there too. But this would be the column that you're looking at when you're talking about the state aid portion of these projects.
So the first 3, well, okay. So, all right. So Allenstown has voter approval if state aid is available, which is roughly $20 million. The other 2 do not have approval. So the 19 million and a vote next year in 22 would, yeah, okay. Would, if they voted in favor of the bond in 2022, then this money would come out in 23, the six million.
Yes.
Probably, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And do we have, down at the bottom, Salem, Nashua, Pelham, that have, and, oh, Nashua again, all have approved the school, the bond.
Yes.
Okay. Was that in something that Amy had given us before?
Yes, I believe so. I think at the time, though, the town meetings hadn't happened, so we didn't have the local approval status in that binder she gave you.
Okay, because I had looked for this yesterday and didn't find it, so.
I can send this table out to the committee just so everybody has this.
Okay, that would be, that would be good, Mickey, just so that we know what we're talking about. Are there any other questions on school building aid? I know that when we redid the formula on school building aid, we did it because we didn't like the idea of the state having to pay every year. And the result of that is that right now we have $26 million in roughly in tail money. And that is, that takes away significantly our ability to fund new programs. So I guess that my question is, if we decided to pay off some of that tail money, the money that the state owes the individual school districts, is that something that is feasible to bring that down at this point? It wouldn't give us necessarily any money for 22 and 23, but it might help us significantly in the next budget, the 24, 25. God, I can't believe it's that far out. Okay.
So that's a very interesting question that I don't think anybody's ever asked before. So I think we would have to do a little bit of homework on our side of things for that. But I mean, we at the department right now, we could certainly tell you exactly how much we owe each school district out through 2041, which is the last tail payment that we have. In 2041, we have only $700,000 of payments. But so we could tell you that. So yeah, we can look into that and see. Are there, and I don't know if you would know this, but are there certain, would you want to just pay off a group of projects, do you think, or how would you want to do that?
I think just so Caitlin's aware, I kind of had a conversation with Amy Clark about this, and she did suggest that it could be possible. We probably need some House Bill 2 language around the appropriation, just so it's clear that if there was amounts appropriated for school building aid above and beyond the required payments, how those would be treated. So if we were going to prorate those for the future tail payments that are going to be made, in upcoming years as a way to pay down the liability for the state, I think she could, she could make those payments. Those would be probably, at least for the first year, considered unanticipated revenue for the districts. That's a local school budget issue, but from a state perspective, you could recommend appropriating money to pay off some of the tail quicker than its current schedule.
Anyhow, that's just another thought. Because I'm not sure that we can come up with the, whatever it was, 25 million to do 3 projects, and that some other amount of money might be more beneficial for the future of school building aid. So, I mean, I just throw that out as something to think about, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have the information to have it done, so I just think it would take just some writing of some laws for HB2.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Are there any other questions on this area from the committee? Okay. Caitlin, seeing none, don't go back to career tech, okay?
Okay. Well, the last one is, I think it's probably also an equally complicated one, just based on maybe some questions that have been coming to the Department of Education, but it is the Public School Infrastructure Fund. So as we know, the governor appropriated $30 million, $15 million in 22 and fiscal year 20, and $15 million in fiscal year 23 for the Public School Infrastructure Fund. Just a reminder for those of you that are new, the Public School Infrastructure Fund is a fund of money that school districts can apply for infrastructure, E-rate, and school safety type projects. There's a legislative committee that reviews the school applications and approves the school applications. And then the Department of Education reimburses school districts once the projects have been completed. So we, right now, so the first bit of money was appropriated to the Public School Infrastructure Fund in 2017. It was about $20 million. And then the next pot of money, I believe it was fiscal year 19, but I'm not 100% sure on that, another $10 million was appropriated to that fund. Those funds have been fully obligated to the schools, and those projects have been paid out. So there is no more money available for new projects in the public school infrastructure at this time, unless there's a new appropriation, which that $30 million for the governor's budget would provide. So questions about the Public School Infrastructure Fund?
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there projects waiting for funding?
Yes, there is a wait list of projects. The department provided that. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. So. Can you see my screen again?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we have here, it looks like there's 59 projects on the wait list. I actually don't have the total amount, I believe, on the wait list, but there are still oh, yep, they're right there. So $1.2 million of projects on the wait list currently. So at this time, the committee would probably have to review that project and all projects to, you know, if there was new money appropriated. But
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions on this? This is a commission and not a committee.
okay,
It's I don't know. I don't know who's on it right now. I mean, obviously, there are legislators on it, but there's also the Commission of Education, and a couple of other people that are outside the legislature. And I believe that Representative was appointed as one of the representatives to this commission if it continues. So, okay, are there any questions at all on this? Okay, seeing none. Caitlin, do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
The only other thing is that I know you had asked us to provide information to the committee on the new federal stimulus packages that were available to school districts. So
Yes.
I'm just going to bring that up real quick. So this is very small, so I apologize. This was in your packet from a few weeks ago. But so as of right now, there have been 3 large federal stimulus packages that have passed that have provided funding directly for education through the Department of Education. So those programs are the CARES Act, which provided $33 million, $34 million to school districts. Then there is CRISA Act, which provided $140 million directly to school districts. And now the ARP Act, which provides $350 million to school districts. So it's a lot of federal money being received directly by school districts. In a normal year, like a normal, just regular operation year, the Department of Education flows approximately $130 to $140 million directly to school districts. And so you can imagine we have quite a bit more federal money flowing through the state right now at this time. Each part of this money is flexible money. It's allocated to school districts in a formula that's required by the federal law, meaning the Department of Education has no flexibility in that formula, which is a proportional amount to the Title I formula. So the Title I formula weights enrollment and free and reduced lunch kids. So school districts with a high free and reduced lunch rate get a higher amount of money. We have some school districts that, as you know, Manchester is receiving from CARES Act, for example, almost $7 million. From CRISA, I believe it's almost $28 million. And then we have school districts that receive a few dollars or no dollars at all from this fund. So the CARES Act 1 funding was available to school districts in early May. School districts were notified in April and the money was dispersed in May. Then the governor actually gave school districts out of the state pot of money that had, was not required to be spent for education. The governor allocated an additional $45 million to school districts, and that was available to school districts in November. And that $45 million was specifically related to COVID expenses that had incurred before 12/30. I should mention that the first allocation, the CARES allocation in May, goes through September of 22, and it's relatively flexible. It should be related to COVID and CARES, to COVID and reopening schools, but it's relatively flexible. The second pot of money from the governor had to be spent before 12/30/2020, COVID-related non-budget expenditures, that $45 million, and then that new $150 million. School districts were notified on January 29th, and school districts received their money last week from the Department of Education. That money is some of the most flexible money that I've ever seen in my tenure at the Department of Education as far as federal money. School districts can use it on continuing operations, anything related to any of the other title grants that they receive, special education, reopening, a variety of different things. And we expect the same level of flexibility on the new $350 million that's being awarded to the state, although we don't have all of the information from the U.S. Department of Education at the time. So what you see here in front of you is as of a few weeks ago, but it's the one-time money that school districts received pretty much in fiscal year 21. You could argue that the CARES Act one, even though it was received in May, it really falls under fiscal year 21 because schools really began spending it in fiscal year 21. So you can see here the total. So there's $219 million of new federal money, not counting the $350 million that's coming in shortly. And then on top of it, I was asked to provide in the same spreadsheet the one-time money that was in adequacy too. So a total of $274 million of new federal and state money to school districts in fiscal year 21. So in a few weeks, you will likely see this updated from the Department of Education that has a new column with that additional $350 million on it.
So you'll be giving that to the Senate in their budget deliberations, correct?
Yes, we will.
Okay, and you will be sure to send it to us as well?
Of course.
Thanks. Representative Ellison, I believe you were first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Either Caitlin or Mickey, can I get a copy of this particular shot that's up here, this chart? I'm subbing today, and so I think I probably have it somewhere in all the materials, but if I could just have that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get this one specifically to the entire committee. I'll break out this one schedule.
Thank you.
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caitlin, the money that's coming in for the new act that just happened, is that going, all this money goes to the Department of Education first and then they disperse it out to the school districts, or can the school districts apply for it directly from the federal government?
No, the money goes directly to the Department of Education first. The Department of Education has a large number of application requirements that the department is supposed to do, and then also monitor to make sure the school districts are doing. The Department of Education is responsible for overseeing and approving things like allowability. And we also have a large number of compliance requirements around the funding. It's pretty restrictive. So what our process is that the department, in addition, the U.S. Department of Education doesn't do the allocations. The Department of Education itself, we actually have staff on hand that will put together the allocations and with our data. So the process is that the U.S. Department of Education will typically issue a grant award notification. And then the Department of Education will do a budget, meaning figuring out how much money is directly allocated to schools versus how much of that money is allocated to the Department of Education, because we do receive some money that we need to oversee and monitor the grant. The Department of Education then prepares allocations that are given to school districts. School districts usually have to do assurances as well as an application for the funding. So we allocate the money to the school districts in something called our grant management system. And our grant management system then shows the school district what their allocation is. They can go in and write an application. We have Department of Education staff that review the applications to make sure each thing that they're requesting is allowable. And then we will approve the school districts to start spending that money. School districts then go in monthly and request reimbursements from the Department of Education for the expenses that they incurred in the previous month. And this is the process that I'm actually that I'm talking about, is the process for most of our federal grants at the Department of Education. So that process seems kind of cumbersome, which it is, but that is what the Department of Education does, and it's kind of what we do best. We're set up to do that. So that's why that money kind of is used in that same way.
Madam Chair, can I have a follow-up?
Certainly, May.
Thank you. So the district has to actually spend the money before it gets reimbursed?
Yes.
And what happens if the district doesn't have cash on hand to pay the bill prior to being reimbursed? How does that work?
I'm not sure, we've never had that situation. We are relatively quick as far as doing the reimbursements. There may be another federal process that we would need to follow, but we actually have a Treasury agreement with the U.S. Department of Treasury that actually says that we will do a draw several days after the expense has been reincurred. It's how education grants typically have worked. So
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, so we are not putting any school district in harm's way for paying ahead of time. Is that your?
We have never had a school district request that, request anything relative to that, but we could certainly, if a school district had that issue, we could talk through them. It would require us working with the U.S. Department of Education and potentially some other people at the feds to see what to do with it, and also including New Hampshire Treasury and whatnot. But we've never had that issue before. We've had issues when you have a school district that hasn't drawn down the money for like 5 or 6 months, and then all of a sudden they're saying, oh, well, now we actually, can you get this to us quickly? But with the quick turnaround, it doesn't seem to be an issue.
Thank you. Representative Murray, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much money has yet to be dispersed? How much money do you have that is available for students to request?
Are you talking about how much is the department not allocated to the schools, or how much has the schools not spent of what has been allocated?
I guess perhaps both.
So the department has allocated all of the first $34 million, all of the $45 million, and all of the $140 million. So the department has put all of that money in the school district's hands. The $45 million has been fully expended because it had to be fully expended by 12/30, with the exception of a few pennies being returned to the Department of Education, but most of it has been completely expended. The last I had looked as far as the $34 million, I believe school districts had asked for reimbursement of $9 million out of the $34 million. And then the remaining $140 million, because the department awarded that money last week, school districts have not asked for reimbursement at all yet.
Thank you. Follow up?
Certainly.
So this is probably a very simple question. When you've allocated the money to the school districts, you tell the school district that they have been allotted this much money.
Yes.
And that it's up to them. They know this. So now they need to go through your process in order to get that money dispersed.
Yeah, so we put it in the grants management system, and we also typically, especially in these, send an email that has that information on it.
Thank you.
Caitlin, so the schools have the ability to look at the grant management system, and that's how they request all their stuff and how the payments get made. Well,
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Grants management system, each school district has its own login. Actually, many school districts have many people that can log in depending on the different grants. You pull up all of the grants that are available to a school each year. They can go in, they write all the budget. It's a workflow type system. You can see the schools write a budget. You can see the Department of Education approvals or any comments on the budget. If they were to say, write a request for a pony, where you say, well, that's not allowable, please take that out of your application. And then when they go in and put the monthly draws in, it actually interfaces directly with New Hampshire First, our accounting system. So somebody from the department, like Representative Ellison, when he was at the department, would go in and say, yes, I approve your expenditure. He would, superintendent would first ask for permission. The Department of Education staff would go in and say, yes, I approve your expenditure. And then it goes through our payment system. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any further questions on this topic? I guess that for me, I am a little concerned that in the 34 million, that only 9 million has been spent. That is, or I guess I shouldn't say spent, I should say billed to the Department of Education. especially since we have heard, that this, and I think that it doesn't have to necessarily be directly COVID related in this particular grant. And the next one coming out is the same way. So there's a lot of federal money floating around out there, and there will be more. So I think we need to, once we get the allocation of the 350, 320, whatever the figure is, that we need to sincerely encourage our school boards to look at, what are the shortfalls in the way they can spend the money. Obviously, we don't want them to increase their budgets by whatever amount it is, but there are obviously shortfalls that every school has. If it's, maybe it's, they've never had money to do summer school before, so let's plan on doing summer school, or, let's plan on, we've half the computers that we've handed out to kids are not any good anymore, or they need larger servers, or, there's all kinds of things that each one of us can think of pretty much off the top of our head in order to, for the school districts to allocate this money. So anyhow, that's enough of me. Representative Murray.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Caitlin, are there, I guess we really don't know what's going to happen with that 350 million, but might there be opportunities that some of that money could go to some of the 59 projects listed on the infrastructure? Might they be projects that would fall within the rubric of the 350 million?
So there might be. I'm not familiar with them on the top of my head. We would have to look at that, but I think this is some of the most flexible money that I've ever seen, federal money. So I think it would be a different process, because the school districts would have to write an application for that, and they would have to follow the federal process rather than getting approval from that the commission. And one, it would have to be completely segregated. But it's entirely possible that some, if not all, of those projects might also be allowable under these various federal pots of money. The other thing too is with this new federal money, the new federal stimulus money, it's the first time since at least I've been at the Department of Education, if not ever, that federal education money can be used for construction. Construction is very rarely a allowable use of federal education funding. Other federal funding, of course, but not education money. So we are working through those requirements too at the department, because once you're doing construction with federal money, there's a lot of compliance restrictions that come in place, but these projects very well may be allowable.
Follow up?
Yes, please.
That was my next frightening question, is that could schools use some of this to deal with the tail? I know we owe money to the schools, that's the tail. Could schools use some of this money to pay down what they're paying on that? And I guess the other part of this is, this is maybe unrealistic since we only have a very short time in which we have to make our decisions. Is there any way we can use information like this to inform our decision making, or is it just too short a timeline? Thank you.
So as far as for the projects on the wait list, we could.
She's talking about the bonds.
Oh, for the bond.
And the wait list too, any information of how we decide.
For the bonds, I mean, I think we would have to work with our federal partners on that one. That one would be an interesting one. I don't know. I can look into it. I don't know if we can get an answer soon enough on that one. But the bond payments are pretty large too. So some of the school districts with smaller allocations that might not go to that much of it. So we could certainly look into it though.
Okay, all right. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Representative Murray, I thought we had discussed the,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So I'm just thinking right now, so like for a period of allowability, I think probably for the bonds, it's likely no, because the period of allowability would be an expense that was occurred a long time ago, whereas there is a very specific period of allowability for these grants. So it would probably need to be expenses that's incurred or were began to incur after 3/1/2020, 3/13, whatever the dates are. I'd have to look at each individual grant. So the bonds, those are probably a likely no, but future construction projects, potentially.
okay. Is there, has the federal government made up their minds if we can use the old free and reduced lunch numbers for Title 1, 2,
Yes.
3, 12, 17, whatever?
Yep. Yes. So we actually do have the authority to use the fiscal year 2000. Well, it's funny. So the way that the federal language says, it says the departments can use the best available data, which may include fiscal 19 and 20 enrollment numbers. So for fiscal 2020, we will be using for fiscal year 2022, the allocations that we'll be doing in this fall, we will be using the 19 and 20 data.
Well, that's very good news.
It is great news for the title programs. I'm not sure if that same announcement has been made for other title program or other federal programs like IDEA, the special education grant, or career and tech education. But I do know for the title programs, which the title programs are $70 million across the state. That is great news.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Caitlin? Representative Porter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, Caitlin, I want to thank you. Boy, you know your stuff and you explain it in a way that I can understand it. So I appreciate that. I had a question about, and this is nothing we've discussed this morning, but it is in the budget. To move a position from federal funds to general funds was a request that was made. And I'm wondering if you can explain what that position is and what the duties are and why it's going from federal to general funds.
So I don't oversee the entire Department of Education budget, so we would actually need our CFO, Tammy Valencourt, to be able to provide that information. I can certainly have her either provide it in writing or another time, but I don't have that information.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate if you could do that for us.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, Representative Porter. But yeah, just send it to Mickey and he'll get it to us, okay? Representative Ellison, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I'm all set. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. Caitlin, I have a question about this data system that you want to do.
Absolutely. Thank you actually for asking. I know the committee has some concerns with the data system and especially the large ticket price that it comes with. But so the Department of Education is requesting, and we have requested for the last several years now, funding for a new student information system. So in 2001, the Department of Education spent a substantial amount of money developing a new student information system. And we're talking about 20 years ago at this point. And at that point, I don't know, but I would assume an RFP was put out and the department developed with a contractor that system. That system was a system that was a leader in the country. There wasn't software, off the shelf software that was available to be able to do this level of work. And at that time, I said we were a leader in the country. Now here we are 20 years later, and the Department of Education has the same system in place. And that same system is how we collect all of our data from school districts across the entire state to do a variety of different calculations, specifically like adequacy, graduation rates, dropout rates, all of the enrollment reports that are used for everything across the board for the state. So that information in the student data system, the department, we really just feel like we need to have a new student data system. So in that time period, many vendors have developed across the country to have various different software packages to collect this data. The department is requesting $1.5 million each year on an ongoing basis for a new student information system. That new student information system, we will believe, will save a lot of work for both department staff and additionally school district staff. So right now what the process is, it's school districts enter information to the Department of Education in essentially giant Excel spreadsheets with all of the different information that we collect on each student. That information is aggregated up to the Department of Education and reports are produced. And then the system has some data validation, but each level of data validation that the system has, meaning checks for errors, that's manual data validation that the Department of Education staff is coding into the system. So then we will have data that has been changed or school districts data that has been reviewed, and school districts find errors, for example, two school districts reporting the same student, that information is sent back to the school districts. School districts have to manually change it for the department and then potentially manually change it in their own systems. Now, this is a lot of work that is in 2001 absolutely necessary, but with the advancements in technology now, it is absolutely not necessary for staff to be doing that level of work. There should be automatic systems interfaces where the systems can automatically upload information from the Department of Education. Our system can then process that data, have a variety of data validation checks, and then report information back down to school districts and make changes automatically if needed. We are just, right now, we're just behind times. We're behind other states because we haven't made the investment in the systems that we need to. And so purchasing new systems going forward would cause a number of improvements for the department and then also for department of school staff across the state. I mean, we estimate that school staff could save probably across the state hundreds or maybe thousands of hours. Some of the larger school districts have full-time staff that are dedicated to entering data into student information systems. So it's pretty cumbersome and it's a large lift, but think of this as, you know, when we invested in systems at the Department of Revenue to have automatic filing or e-filing of taxes is a big lift. It's expensive, but the amount of time and money and resources that it's saved for the taxpayers across the state has been exponential, and this would be the same sort of thing at the department.
So, okay, I'm sorry, Representative Porter. No, who was first? Representative Murray? I don't care.
I don't know.
One of you go for it.
All right, thanks again. So I guess two things. It sounds like you will be collecting and manipulating the same data that you're collecting now.
Yes.
So is there any new data that you will be collecting, or is this really just going to be a new way of doing what you're doing now? Or
So,
what new information are you collecting?
So new data is up to you guys. So every time you pass a bill that says the Department of Education must, you know, collect X, Y, or Z, like a gifted and talented report, for example, that would require a new data collection. We collect data that's required for state or federal reporting requirements. There were some pretty substantial changes in the last couple of years relative to ESSA, the new the Every Student Succeeds Act, and we had to make quite a few changes. Fortunately, because of those changes that were made, most of that we were able to pay for with federal money, but it's still relatively limiting. The ability of our system only goes so far, and we're basically maxed out on capacity for that one. But yeah, we don't collect or maintain any data that's not required for state and or federal reporting requirements.
Thank you.
Representative Porter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I'm understanding correctly, the process now is that the school districts send the information to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you process it or do stuff there. And under this system, you'll collect it from the school district. You will be able to get into the school districts directly or?
No. School districts would be able to have an automated interface with the system that they could tell, oh, give Caitlin this specific data at this time, and they would set it up that way. Because the school districts at this point have all invested in their own software that do this. But I would never be able to say, oh, I want to go press, I want to know all of the kids that wore a blue shirt today at Concord High and then go collect that information. That's absolutely, we would never have that information.
Okay,
Nor, and that would be against FERPA, when we would never be able, we would never, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to collect more than you guys make me collect already.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that information, because I had heard concerns about privacy with this new system, and I just wanted to make sure that all of our remembering Representative Kirk on all the privacy things that he worked so hard for. I just wanted to make sure that they were still there.
No, I mean, what we do envision is now the next time a new data element is collected, that there be that improve the way that it's being collected. So for example, I forget which bill it is, but there is a bill right now in House Education, and Representative Ellison might know this, to allow school districts to include 3 genders for a student, so non-binary, male or female. Right now, the Department of Education is actually required to collect gender for a student and report on gender as a subgroup for a variety of state and or federal requirements. We don't have a 3rd category. That is actually going to be a lot of manual work for the Department of Education to collect, and then also for the school districts to be able to report, because there are very specific, very finicky templates right now that the Department of Education has at school districts download information from their system and then upload to the Department of Education. So we would need to change our system to have that new field. Then we would need to change the download and upload templates to the department. And then we would have to change all of our reporting, our manual reporting that we're doing on the back side of things. So each time there's a reporting field. With a new student information system, this is where we could see this would be press a button, or well, we would tell our vendor that would maintain all of this information for us, hey, we need this new change, there's a new state law, and it would automatically change our system. And then school districts that have the same vendor, because there's only so many vendors in the state, but school districts that have the same vendor, they would probably see absolutely no change on their side of all. It would just automatically change what is being reported to the department.
So Caitlin, I know that school systems bought student information systems, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Or at least it was started then so that it was automated. I believe there are 2 or 3 different systems out there right now at the schools.
So we think there's about 10 large vendors at the schools right now, but there's 2 or 3 large ones in the state. The largest one right now we know of is Power School, and almost everybody's using Power School. And then there's Alma, which seems to be up and coming, and Infinite Campus. There's a few other ones that are out there, and you're correct. So schools have gone out already and purchased their own software on their side of things, and it has made their lives a lot easier. We wouldn't ask school districts to change their systems that they are using. Originally, we had potentially thought about something like that, but we're too far behind the gate on this one. Had we done this in 2015, maybe when school districts hadn't made substantial investments in systems, they would maybe want to use our system. But now what we see is we see an opportunity if the Department of Education selects a vendor that many school districts in the state are using right now, the school districts would likely be offered a discount from their vendor too. We've actually required that as information for our RFP that's published right now. So we do hope that we should be able to offer some sort of incentivizing for school districts that either want to change vendors to the state vendor or are already on that vendor, so then they could have a reduced cost. School districts are paying anywhere from $8 to $15 per student right now for a student information system, and we would hope that we would be able to incentivize the cost of like $2 or $3 if they were on the state system. Now, and when I say the state system, I still mean we would have an entirely separate instance. So we would have the Department of Education with the Department of Education information, the school district would have their information, and they would interface where they were been told to interface, but we would never be able to see information that we can't see, or we're not supposed to see, rather.
So are you suggesting, and make sure I understand this, that school districts would have the opportunity to have a spot on the state
Yes,
system?
absolutely.
Then they would pay whom?
So likely their vendor would just charge them less money. So with their vendor, so say if it were Power School, for example, Power School would say, hey, we can offer you your system at $2 per student right now, rather than the $7 per student that you're paying.
Okay. And you would have interfaces with all of the various systems that are out there in the schools. Is that correct?
Yes.
Representative Porter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caitlin, would this be something that could be paid for with the federal money that's coming in?
So right now we actually have federal money to purchase the system. So we have, if you see historically going back, we have put a capital budget request in of like $2.5 million, and then the $1.5 million in our operating budget. We have been successful in going out to use a competitive federal grant to purchase the capital initial purchase. So you won't see that in the capital budget this year. As far as the state level portions, there may be, but we actually we receive a pretty limited amount of money at the state that is really for the oversight and management of the grant. So we could potentially, but likely, so we could choose between slowing down approving grants for school districts because we could have less staff and then having a quicker data system, or we could have no data system but quicker approvals for the $150 million for school staff. So it's one or the other.
Could school districts use this money to update their
school districts could absolutely update their systems with this, but it wouldn't affect the Department of Education at all. Right now, the issue is the Department of Education budgets, systems, not the school district systems.
So the 1.2 is for operating costs, is that correct?
1.5, but yes, for the ongoing operating costs of the system.
You just spent $300,000 on me.
I mean, I'll take 1.2 if that's all I can get.
The 1.5 is what's in the budget. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. We actually, we had 2 million in the budget. And I believe that we've reduced it down to 1.5. We've actively, because we have that federal grant to purchase the system, we put out the RFP, and some of our proposals and the conversations we've been having with the vendors, it looks like it's going to be about 1.5 rather than the 2. So we did feel comfortable reducing it down to 1.5.
Representative, I'm sorry, I don't know who was first. Representative Murray, were you first, or Representative Turcotte?
No, he was first.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was writing something on my pad and missed the hand. So Representative Turcotte, please.
Thank you. It didn't really matter who went. You mentioned a few times that with the system that you think that it would require less staff. Have you estimated the actual number of, say, hours that would be saved at various levels?
Yeah, it wouldn't require less staff at the Department of Education, unfortunately, because the Department of Education is still responsible for collecting all of the data and working with the school districts. Not initially. I wouldn't be comfortable reducing any staff, but some school districts spend, I can tell you, hundreds of hours submitting data to the Department of Education and then reconciling that data with the Department of Education. There's staff that spend most of their June and July working with the Department of Education. And I always hate the unfortunate time where a school district thinks that this is, let me just give you a scenario. So I have a school district that enters a bunch of information on time, they meet their deadline that they're supposed to do, their staff enters, we call them I4C coordinators, their I4C data coordinator, put all of the information in, the superintendents review the information and then certify, meaning they sign off believing all the information is correct by the appropriate deadline, which is usually the second week of July. Then a school district is late, another school district, and the school district enters all of their information. Their superintendent signs off on it. It goes to the Department of Education. Now the Department of Education system starts looking at the two different data collections and they're saying, oh no, there's anomalies. Both school districts both reported Representative Umberger and all these other people. And, or they said that, you know, she's in 3rd grade, but last year we had her in 5th grade, and all this information that's wrong. And so not only does the school district that had the information wrong and that was late have to get called back by the Department of Education, the other superintendent has to get called back too. And oftentimes, you know, they have a part-time staff that did it, and that part-time staff is already out of the office for the summer. They don't work maybe July and August, and they're having to call somebody back and pay them overtime. Or the superintendent is in there doing, you know, the data entry themselves. The number of times that I've spent late nights working with the superintendent directly to make sure that the data is entered is kind of crazy. And that's an unfortunate consequence of having these older systems at the department.
Okay, thank
Representative Murray.
Thank you. I was trying to point that he was next to me. This picture was next to me, and then I realized you probably don't know what picture is next to me.
And
Anyway.
he's a couple below for me, so.
If you didn't get the operating funds from us, would you not be able to purchase the system?
Likely not, no.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other outstanding issues that we want to talk to DOE about? I appreciate it, and I think that everybody has helped us to understand where we are and some decisions that we're going to have to make over the next 3 days. So thank you very much, Caitlin, and I really appreciate everything that not only you, but the entire staff over at DOE does to support the budget areas that that we have. And so.
And we really appreciate you taking the time as the committee to go over to make sure you understand all of the details before you make some really large decisions. And so I know we always are very happy to have these conversations with you guys.
Okay, thank you very much. What I would like to do is take an hour for lunch and come back at 1 o'clock, and we will look through what Mickey has provided for us and see if there isn't a couple things that we can take care of today. Representative Lynn, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. You know what, Madam Chair, the Speaker has appointed me to something called the State County Budget Commission, which is scheduled for a meeting at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Representative Weiler is also on that commission. I have to be honest with you. I have no idea what it is or what it does. I looked at the statute, which doesn't seem to give much information. So I think I'm supposed to go there.
Bob, I think that if you send Ken a note and tell him that we are not finished, and would he take notes and get back to you? I'm sure that he will be very cooperative in that, because we really do need to get some of this stuff done.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. So I'll send him a note right now. All right. I'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Don't we have a committee for everything in the Okay.
I would be curious. The most interesting thing about this would be to find out exactly what this commission does, but I'll find that out some other time.
Holy mackerel. Okay. All right. We'll see you all at 1 o'clock, and hopefully we will be able to get some of these things accomplished that are what Mickey calls the low hanging fruit. And we'll see what happens. So see you at 1, folks.
All right,
Thank you.
great.